My name is Sophia Wright, 25 years old, and what should have been a time of mourning almost fell apart when my mother betrayed me in the worst possible way. After promising to take care of everything for the family, she handed me a check for just $1,000 from my grandfather's $10 million estate and told me I didn't need more than that. My mother thought I would accept it quietly like always, but this time she went too far. The consequences were far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Before I continue my story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more family secrets nobody talks about. I never expected my life to change so drastically after Grandpa Richard's funeral. He had always been my rock, the one person in the family who truly understood me. We shared the same thoughtful nature, the same dry humor, and he always told me I reminded him of himself when he was young. The day of the funeral was appropriately dreary. Rain pattered against the windows of the funeral home in Boston, where family members I barely knew gathered to pay their respects. My mother, Diane, was the picture of the grieving daughter, tissues clutched in her manicured hand, accepting condolences with practiced grace. But something about her composure felt rehearsed, calculated. I stood in the corner, genuinely heartbroken. Grandpa and I had been close, especially in the last few years. He'd been diagnosed with heart disease 3 years prior, and I'd made it a point to visit him weekly, bringing his favorite black coffee and blueberry muffins. We'd sit in his study, surrounded by books, and he'd tell me stories about his younger days, how he built his real estate empire from nothing, how he met my grandmother, how he navigated difficult business decisions. "The most important thing in life, Sophia," he often told me, "is to know your own worth and never let anyone diminish it." 2 weeks after the funeral, Mom called a family meeting at her suburban McMansion. My father had passed away when I was 16, so it was just my mother, my older brother Jason, and me. Jason flew in from Chicago, where he worked as an investment banker. He rarely made time for family matters, but the promise of inheritance seemed to clear his schedule. "Dad left everything to me," Mom announced without preamble, sitting primly on her white leather sofa. "As the executor of his will, I'll be handling the distribution of his assets." I frowned. He never mentioned that to me. We talked about his will several times. Mom's smile tightened. "Well, sweetheart, there are things he discussed with me privately. I was his daughter, after all." Jason leaned forward. "So what are we looking at here?" Mom took a delicate sip of her tea. "The estate is valued at approximately $10 million. There are the properties in Massachusetts and Florida, his investment portfolio, and various other assets." "And how will it be divided?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "I'll be retaining most of it," she said casually. "As I said, Dad left it to me to manage. But I've decided to give Jason $1 million to help with his new business venture." Jason smiled, satisfied. I waited for her to continue, to mention my portion, but she moved on to discussing tax implications. Finally, I interrupted. "Mom, what about me?" She looked almost surprised, as if she'd forgotten I was there. "Oh, Sophia. Well, you're still finding your way, aren't you? Working at that little art gallery, living in that tiny apartment. I've decided to give you $1,000. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. $1,000? Out of 10 million? "You don't need more than that right now," she said dismissively. "You've always been frugal. And honestly, you wouldn't know what to do with more. But Grandpa would have wanted—" "Sophia," she cut me off, her voice sharp. "I know what your grandfather would have wanted. He trusted my judgment. Now, I've already transferred the funds to Jason, and I have a check for you." She pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the coffee table. I didn't touch it. "This isn't right," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't be dramatic," Jason chimed in. "Mom knows what she's doing. Besides, I have actual responsibilities, a family on the way, a business to run. What would you do with $1 million? Blow it on art supplies?" I felt something break inside me. It wasn't about the money. It was about being valued, being seen. It was about my mother's blatant favoritism, her dismissal of my worth, and it was about Grandpa's wishes being ignored. "I need to see the will," I said firmly. Mom's face hardened. "That won't be necessary. Everything is being handled properly." "If everything is being handled properly, there should be no problem showing me the will." "Sophia, enough." Her voice rose slightly. "You're being disrespectful to your grandfather's memory with these accusations." I stood up, trembling with anger and hurt. "No, Mom. What's disrespectful is whatever game you're playing. Grandpa and I talked about his plans. This doesn't add up." "Well, plans change," she said coldly. "Take the check, Sophia. It's more than generous considering your contributions to this family." I left without the check, my mind racing. Something was very wrong, and I was determined to find out what. Little did I know that my mother's betrayal ran much deeper than I could have imagined, and that the $1,000 check was just the beginning of a twisted plot to keep me under her control forever. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. Tears streamed down my face as I replayed the conversation in my mind. My brother's smug expression, my mother's cold dismissal, it all felt like a nightmare. But beneath my grief, something else was brewing. Determination. My apartment was indeed small, as my mother had so rudely pointed out. A one-bedroom in Somerville that I decorated with care on my gallery assistant's salary. I'd always taken pride in making something beautiful out of limited means. That night, though, the cozy space felt suffocating. I paced the floor, my thoughts racing. Grandpa Richard had been a meticulous man. He kept detailed records of everything and valued transparency above all. It seemed impossible that he would leave everything to my mother without any stipulations, especially knowing how she operated. I picked up my phone and called the one person who might have some insight. Margaret, Grandpa's longtime secretary. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm with affection. "Sophia, dear, I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up?" "Not great, Margaret," I admitted. "There's something strange happening with Grandpa's will." There was a pause. "I was afraid of this," she said finally. "Your grandfather made some changes to his will last year, but he was very private about the details. Even I wasn't privy to the final version. Do you know who his lawyer was?" "Lawrence Bennett. They'd been friends for decades." I jotted down the name. "Thanks, Margaret. I appreciate it." "Sophia," she hesitated. "Your grandfather loved you very much. Whatever is happening, just know that." After we hung up, I did a quick search for Lawrence Bennett. His office was in downtown Boston, not far from the gallery where I worked. I'd go there first thing in the morning. Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed and turned, memories of Grandpa flooding my mind. The day he taught me to fish at his lake house. The Christmas he gave me my first real set of paints. The proud look on his face when I graduated college with my art history degree, despite my mother's constant criticism of my impractical choice. The next morning, I called in sick to work and headed to Bennett Law offices. The receptionist informed me that Mr. Bennett was in court all day, but I could make an appointment for later in the week. I scheduled one for Thursday afternoon and left, unsure of my next move. On impulse, I drove to Grandpa's house, now my mother's house, I supposed. I knew she would be at her weekly tennis match, giving me a window of opportunity. I still had my key, and the security code hadn't been changed yet. The house felt different without him. Emptier, colder. I made my way to his study, the room where we'd spent so many hours together. To my surprise, it was already being transformed. Boxes were stacked against the walls, his books being packed away. His beautiful mahogany desk, however, was still intact. I sat in his leather chair, running my fingers over the worn armrests. Then I began opening drawers. Most contained ordinary items, pens, notepads, paper clips. But in the bottom right drawer, hidden beneath a false bottom I remembered him showing me once, I found a key with a small tag labeled Safety Deposit Box, Boston National, year 247. My heart raced as I pocketed the key. I continued searching and found a small address book. Flipping through it, I located Lawrence Bennett's personal number, different from the office number I'd called earlier. I took a photo of the page with my phone. Just as I was about to leave, I heard the front door open. Panic surged through me as I quickly closed the drawer and moved toward the study door. "Hello? Is someone here?" My mother's voice rang out. I stepped into the hallway, forcing a casual expression. "Hey, Mom." She jumped, clutching her chest. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" "I just came to say goodbye to the house. Get some closure." Her eyes narrowed. "You should have called first. I'm having the realtor come by today to discuss listing the property." "Already? It's been barely a month. There's no point in being sentimental about real estate," she said dismissively. "Besides, it's too much house for one person." "You're selling Grandpa's house?" The idea seemed unthinkable. This place had been in our family for generations. "My house now," she corrected. "And yes, I'm selling it. I'm thinking of buying something in Palm Beach, a fresh start." I bit my tongue, afraid of what might come out if I spoke. Instead, I nodded and moved toward the front door. "Sophia," she called after me. "Have you reconsidered the check? It's still available if you want it." The condescension in her voice made my blood boil. "Keep it, Mom. I don't need your charity." Her face hardened. "You've always been so stubborn. Just like your father. Look where it got him." The low blow about my father, who had died of a heart attack after years of stress dealing with my mother's emotional manipulation, was the final straw. I turned and walked out without another word. That afternoon, I went to Boston National Bank. The safety deposit box key burned in my pocket. At the bank, I showed my ID and the key and was led to a private room where the box was brought to me. Inside, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it, written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Sophia," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means you've discovered something isn't right. I always knew you were the clever one." The letter went on to explain that he had indeed updated his will the previous year. He had left specific bequests to several people, including me. I was to receive $2 million, his art collection, which he knew I treasured, and his lake house in New Hampshire. "Your mother has never approved of your independent spirit," he wrote. "She may try to interfere with my wishes. If that happens, contact Lawrence immediately. He has copies of all the necessary documents." At the bottom of the letter was a phone number with the instruction, "Call this number if anything seems amiss. He'll know what to do." I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I pulled out my phone and called Lawrence Bennett's personal number. "Lawrence Bennett," a gruff voice answered. "Mr. Bennett, this is Sophia Wright, Richard Wright's granddaughter. We need to talk about my grandfather's will." There was a long pause. "Sophia, I've been trying to reach you. There are some serious concerns about the will your mother presented. Can you come to my office now?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I promised, a strange mixture of vindication and dread settling in my stomach. As I left the bank, I knew my life was about to change dramatically. My mother had not only betrayed me, but had potentially committed fraud. The realization was devastating, but I straightened my shoulders, channeling Grandpa's strength. Whatever came next, I would face it head on. Lawrence Bennett's office was exactly what you'd expect from a man of his reputation. Dignified, tasteful, with law books lining the walls and a view of Boston Harbor that most people would kill for. The man himself was in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Sophia," he said, standing to greet me, "you look so much like your grandfather when he was young. That same determined look in your eyes." I smiled despite myself. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Please sit down." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "I've been concerned since the reading of the will. Something didn't feel right." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling I knew. Bennett opened a folder on his desk. "The will that your mother presented, supposedly the most recent one, left everything to her, with small discretionary amounts for her to distribute as she saw fit." "And that wasn't my grandfather's last will?" "No. I drew up his final will myself, just 8 months ago." He pulled out a document. In it, he left the bulk of his estate to be divided among several beneficiaries. You were to receive $2 million, his art collection, and the lake house property. My throat tightened. So the will my mother presented is either an older version or, he hesitated, or a forgery, I finished for him. He nodded gravely. I've been trying to contact you since the reading, but your mother assured me she would relay the information. I take it she didn't. No, she didn't. The magnitude of my mother's deception was beginning to sink in. She gave my brother $1 million and offered me 1,000. Bennett's eyebrows shot up. That's not even close to what your grandfather intended. He sighed heavily. Sophia, I need to ask, did you find anything at the bank? Richard mentioned he'd left something for you there. I pulled out the letter from my bag and handed it to him. He read it carefully, nodding as if confirming something he already suspected. This matches perfectly with our conversations before he signed the final will, Bennett said. He was worried about exactly this scenario playing out. What do we do now? I asked. We file a petition with the probate court immediately. Challenge the fraudulent will. With this letter and my testimony, we have a strong case. He leaned forward. But you should be prepared, Sophia. This will get ugly. Your mother won't give up easily, and family disputes over inheritance can bring out the worst in people. I'm not afraid of ugly, I said firmly. I'm afraid of letting her get away with this. Bennett smiled slightly. You really are your grandfather's granddaughter. He checked his watch. I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, don't confront your mother. Don't give her any indication that you know. I nodded, though staying quiet went against every instinct I had. What about the money she's already given to Jason? If the court rules in our favor, he'll have to return it. All distributions made under the fraudulent will would be nullified. As I left Bennett's office, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Dinner at my house tomorrow, 7 p.m. Family matters to discuss. I stared at the screen, wondering what new manipulation she had planned. Whatever it was, I would be ready. But first, I needed more information. I drove to Jason's hotel. My relationship with my brother had always been complicated. 5 years older than me, he had been our mother's clear favorite since childhood. While I took after our father, artistic, thoughtful, emotional, Jason was cut from the same cloth as our mother, ambitious, calculating, status-conscious. He answered the door in a business suit, clearly just back from a meeting. Sophia, he said, surprised. What are you doing here? We need to talk, I said, pushing past him into the suite. I'm actually on my way out. It's about Grandpa's will, I interrupted. And the $1 million Mom gave you. That got his attention. He loosened his tie and gestured for me to sit. What about it? Did you know Grandpa's real will left me $2 million, his art collection and the lake house? Jason's expression flickered, just enough to tell me he knew something. Mom said Grandpa changed his mind at the last minute, that he wanted her to handle the distribution. And you believed that? Without seeing any proof? He shrugged. Why wouldn't I? She's our mother. She's also manipulative and has always played favorites, I said bluntly. Did you even ask to see the will? Look, Sophia, I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. The will Mom presented isn't the real one. Grandpa's lawyer confirmed it. Jason paled slightly. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's the truth. And tomorrow, I'm filing a petition with the probate court to challenge the fraudulent will. Do you have any idea what this will do to the family? He asked, his voice rising. What family, Jason? The one where Mom gives you $1 million and me 1,000? The one where you've always gotten everything and I've gotten scraps? He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. It's not that simple. Actually, it is. Did you know about this? Did you know she was cheating me out of my inheritance? Jason wouldn't meet my eyes. She said you wouldn't use the money wisely, that you'd waste it on art or donate it to some charity. She said Grandpa agreed before he died that you weren't ready for that kind of responsibility. The betrayal cut deep, not just from my mother, but from my brother who had apparently gone along with it without question. And you believed her. She's our mother, he repeated weakly. She's coming after me for a reason, Jason. She's always resented my independence, my refusal to live life on her terms. And now she's using Grandpa's money to try to control me, to keep me dependent. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the conversation. Just so you know, when the real will is enforced, you'll have to give that million back. Sophia, wait, he called as I reached the door. What are you going to do? I turned back to him. I'm going to fight for what Grandpa wanted, for what's right. You should ask yourself if you're on the right side of this. As I drove home, the weight of what lay ahead settled on my shoulders. My mother had the resources and the ruthlessness to make this difficult. But I had something stronger. The truth. And I was done being silenced, done being diminished, done being controlled. Tomorrow would be the beginning of a battle I never wanted, but couldn't afford to lose. Not just for the inheritance, but for my dignity and the memory of the grandfather who had believed in me. The next morning, I met with Lawrence Bennett at 8 a.m. sharp. We spent 2 hours going over the petition to challenge the will, reviewing all the evidence we had. Grandpa's letter, Bennett's testimony as the lawyer who drew up the legitimate will, and copies of the document itself. Once we file this, Bennett warned, there's no going back. Your mother will be served with papers, and this will become a matter of public record. I understand, I said, signing my name at the bottom of the petition. I'll file it today. The court should set a hearing date within a few weeks. He patted my hand. You're doing the right thing, Sophia. Your grandfather would be proud. I wasn't feeling particularly proud as I drove to work. I felt sick, actually. Despite everything, Diane Wright was still my mother. The woman who had kissed my scraped knees when I was little, who had taught me to read, who had once been my whole world. How had we come to this? At the gallery, I tried to focus on my work, cataloging new pieces for an upcoming exhibition. But my mind kept drifting back to the dinner invitation for tonight. Should I go? Bennett had advised against confronting my mother, but avoiding her would look suspicious. By late afternoon, I had made up my mind. I would attend the dinner, but would be careful not to reveal what I knew. This might be my last chance to understand why she had done this before everything exploded into legal proceedings. I left work early to change clothes, opting for a simple black dress that had been a gift from Grandpa on my last birthday. A small act of defiance, wearing something he had chosen with such care. My mother's house, no longer Grandpa's house in my mind, was lit up when I arrived. Jason's rental car was already in the driveway. I took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. Sophia, right on time. My mother air-kissed my cheek as if nothing was wrong. She was wearing an expensive new dress I hadn't seen before. Come in. Jason is already here. The dining room was set with the good china and crystal, candles flickering on the table. Jason sat stiffly in his chair, not quite meeting my eyes. There was a third person at the table, a man in his 50s, well-dressed and vaguely familiar. Sophia, you remember Robert Caldwell? He was your grandfather's financial advisor. I shook his hand, trying to place him. I vaguely recalled seeing him at Grandpa's office a few times. Lovely to see you again, Sophia, he said smoothly. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. My mother gestured for me to sit. Robert is here to help us discuss some financial matters regarding your grandfather's estate. The meal proceeded with superficial pleasantries. My mother talked about her plans to redecorate, about her friend's daughter's wedding, about anything except what we were really there to discuss. Finally, as the housekeeper cleared the dinner plates, she turned to business. Now, Sophia, I know you were upset about our last conversation, she began, her voice artificially sympathetic. I realized that $1,000 might have seemed inadequate. After some consideration, I've decided to increase your portion. I waited, saying nothing. I'm prepared to give you $50,000, she continued. A much more generous amount, I think you'll agree. Robert has the paperwork prepared. Caldwell slid a document across the table toward me. This is a simple acceptance agreement. It states that you accept the $50,000 as full and final settlement of any claims to your grandfather's estate. I glanced at the paper without touching it. And if I don't sign? My mother's smile tightened. Why wouldn't you sign? It's a very generous offer. Out of a $10 million estate? When Jason got $1 million. I kept my voice level, determined not to show emotion. Your situations are different, she said dismissively. Jason has responsibilities, a career, plans for the future. You're still finding your way. I have a career, Mom. I have plans. Just because they don't match your idea of success doesn't make them invalid. She sighed dramatically. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This attitude, this stubbornness. Your grandfather understood that you weren't ready for serious responsibility. Did he tell you that? Of course he did. We discussed it at length. I almost laughed at the blatant lie. That's interesting. Because Grandpa and I talked every week and he never once indicated he thought I was irresponsible. Well, he wouldn't tell you that to your face, would he? Jason interjected. He wouldn't want to hurt your feelings. I turned to him. Are you really going to sit there and help her do this? Jason looked uncomfortable but said nothing. My mother leaned forward. Sophia, be reasonable. $50,000 is more than generous. You could put a down payment on a condo, upgrade from that tiny apartment. Start building some equity. And all I have to do is sign away my right to contest the will, I said flatly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. There's nothing to contest. This is the distribution your grandfather wanted. I stood up, unable to continue the charade. I think we're done here. Thank you for dinner, Mom. Sophia, don't be childish. Her voice had lost its veneer of sweetness. Sit down and sign the papers. No, I said simply. Then the offer is withdrawn, she snapped. We're back to $1,000. Keep it, I said, turning to leave. I don't want your money. This isn't about the money, she suddenly shouted, her composure cracking. This is about you thinking you know better than everyone else, about you rejecting everything I try to do for you, just like your father. I froze at the mention of my father. What does Dad have to do with this? He was just like you, stubborn, idealistic, thinking money didn't matter as long as you were following your passion. She spat the word like it was dirty. And look where it got him. Dead at 52 because he worked himself to death at a job that barely paid the bills. The room fell silent. My father had been an English professor, not wealthy but happy in his work. He had supported my artistic interests while my mother pushed me toward business school, law, anything more practical. Dad died of a heart attack, I said quietly. A genetic condition, not because of his career choice. He died because he was stressed and overworked, she insisted. Because he refused to listen to reason. Just like you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time saw not my mother but a frightened, controlling woman who equated money with security, with worth, with love. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said finally. But I'm not Dad. And I'm not going to let you use Grandpa's money to control my life. You ungrateful little, she began, but Robert Caldwell placed a restraining hand on her arm. Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time, he suggested smoothly, when emotions aren't running so high. I nodded to him, then looked at Jason, who seemed miserable, but still said nothing in my defense. Goodbye, Jason, Mom. As I walked to my car, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Caldwell. Ms. Right, he called. A moment, please. I stopped, wary. What is it? He glanced back at the house before speaking in a low voice. This isn't right, what she's doing. I want you to know that. Then why are you helping her? Professional obligations. But, he hesitated. Your grandfather was a good man. He trusted me. If you need any information, any documentation that might help your case, here's my personal number. He slipped me a business card. Call me. I took the card, surprised by the unexpected ally. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said grimly. Your mother is going to fight this with everything she has. Be prepared. As I drove away, his warning echoed in my mind. I had just declared war on my own mother, and there was no telling how far she would go to win. But for the first time since Grandpa died, I felt a flicker of hope. The truth was on my side, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The following morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Important information. R.C. Robert Caldwell. I opened my email to find a message with several attachments. The subject line read simply, "For your case." The first attachment was a series of emails between my mother and someone named Gerald Parker, dated a month before Grandpa died. In them, they discussed creating alternative documentation and ensuring there were no loose ends. The second attachment was a copy of a bank statement showing a transfer of $250,000 from my mother's account to Parker's just 2 weeks after Grandpa's death. The third attachment was the most damning. A digital copy of what appeared to be my grandfather's will, the fraudulent one, with metadata showing it had been created on my mother's computer just days before he died. I forwarded everything to Lawrence Bennett with a quick message. "Call me when you see this." My hands were shaking as I set down the phone. This wasn't just about the money anymore. My mother had potentially committed several serious crimes: fraud, forgery, maybe even conspiracy. Bennett called within the hour. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Especially the bank transfer. I know Gerald Parker by reputation. He's a document expert who's been in trouble before for creating backdated papers. What does this mean for our case? It means we don't just have a civil case anymore. This is criminal fraud. I'm going to contact the district attorney's office." The gravity of the situation hit me hard. My mother could go to jail. There was a pause on the line. Yes, she could. Are you prepared for that possibility? Was I? Could I really be the one to send my own mother to prison? But then I thought of Grandpa, of how she had tried to erase his final wishes, of how she had been willing to use his money to control me for the rest of my life. "I'm prepared," I said finally. Truth is truth. She made her choices. "All right. I'll update our petition with this new evidence and contact the DA. In the meantime, be careful. This could get dangerous." "Dangerous? You think my mother would—" "I think people who commit fraud to get $10 million might do a lot of things when they're about to lose it all," he said grimly. "Just watch your back." After hanging up, I went to work in a daze. The gallery was quiet that day, giving me too much time to think about what was happening. Around noon, the bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see Jason walking in. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not bothering to hide my hostility. He glanced around to make sure we were alone. "We need to talk, privately." I led him to the small office in the back of the gallery and closed the door. "Talk." "Mom is freaking out," he said without preamble. "She got a call from her lawyer this morning. Something about new evidence in a case challenging the will. That was you, wasn't it?" "Yes?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Jesus, Sophia. Do you have any idea what you've done? This could destroy her. Destroy all of us." "She destroyed us when she decided to steal my inheritance," I said coldly. "When she decided that Grandpa's wishes didn't matter. Look, I know she can be difficult, controlling, but she's our mother. That doesn't give her the right to commit fraud." He paced the small space. What if I split my inheritance with you? I'll give you $500,000. We can make this go away." I stared at him, incredulous. "This isn't about the money, Jason. It's about the truth. About respecting Grandpa's last wishes. About standing up to someone who thinks they can manipulate and control us because we're family." "You always were self-righteous," he muttered. "Just like Dad." "Is that supposed to be an insult? Dad was a good man, honest, kind. Everything Mom isn't." Jason stopped pacing and faced me. "You don't understand. Mom is fragile. She puts on a strong front, but underneath, she's terrified of ending up with nothing, of being dependent on anyone. That doesn't excuse what she did." "No, but maybe it explains it." He sighed heavily. "After Dad died, she told me once that she'd never let herself be vulnerable again. That money was the only real security in life. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. I remembered how devastated she had been after Dad's death, how she'd thrown herself into making money, building her interior design business from nothing to a successful firm with wealthy clients. "I understand fear," I said more gently. "But this goes beyond fear, Jason. She forged a will. She tried to steal $2 million from me. She was willing to erase Grandpa's final wishes. He looked defeated. What happens now? The case proceeds. And there's something else you should know. The DA might get involved. This could become a criminal matter. Criminal? His face paled. You mean, Mom could go to jail? It's possible. He sank into a chair, head in his hands. This is a nightmare. A nightmare she created, I reminded him. Not me. What do you want, Sophia? Really want? Is it just the money? The lake house? I thought carefully before answering. I want justice for Grandpa. I want what he intended for me. And I want Mom to acknowledge what she did, to take responsibility for once in her life. Jason nodded slowly. I'll talk to her. Try to make her see reason. Maybe there's still a way to resolve this without destroying the family completely. After he left, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept circling back to our conversation. Was there a way to resolve this that didn't end with my mother in jail? Did I even want that? That evening, as I was locking up the gallery, my phone rang. Lawrence Bennett. The court has expedited our hearing due to the new evidence, he told me. We're scheduled for next Tuesday, and the DA wants to meet with you tomorrow to discuss possible criminal charges. That's fast. I'll be there, I promised, making a note of the time and place for the DA meeting. As I walked to my car in the dimming light, I had the strange feeling I was being watched. I glanced around the quiet street but saw nothing unusual. Still, Bennett's warning echoed in my mind. I quickened my pace, relief washing over me as I reached my car and locked the doors. Back at my apartment, I made a cup of tea and tried to settle my nerves. This was all happening so quickly. Just a month ago, my biggest concern had been the upcoming exhibition at the gallery. Now I was preparing to testify against my own mother in a fraud case. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off now or you'll regret it. Some things are worth more than money. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. A threat. It had to be from my mother, or someone working for her. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Bennett with a quick message. Just received this. What should I do? His response was immediate. Save everything. No response. Call police if you feel unsafe. We'll add this to our evidence. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound outside my window. By morning, I was exhausted, but resolute. I wouldn't be intimidated. The meeting with the district attorney, a stern woman named Elaine Cortez, took place in her downtown office. Bennett accompanied me, providing moral support as I went through everything I knew, from the initial check for $1,000 to the evidence Caldwell had provided. This is a strong case, Cortez said when I finished. Clear evidence of intent to defraud, forgery of legal documents, possible conspiracy. Your mother is looking at serious charges. What kind of penalties could she face? I asked, my mouth dry. Given the amount involved and the premeditation, we're talking potential prison time. 3 to 5 years, possibly more. The reality of it hit me again. My mother in prison. Despite everything, the image made me wince. Ms. Wright, Cortez continued, noticing my reaction. I understand this is difficult. She's your mother. But what she did was criminal. She tried to steal your inheritance through fraud and forgery. Then she threatened you when you discovered the truth. I know, I said quietly. I'm not backing down. It's hard. Of course it is, Bennett said gently. No one expects you to be happy about this. After the meeting, Bennett walked me to my car. The hearing is in 5 days. Be prepared for your mother to pull out all the stops. She might try to paint you as unstable, greedy, anything to discredit you. I'll be ready, I assured him. That afternoon, I received another unexpected visitor at the gallery. Robert Caldwell again, looking nervous as he glanced over his shoulder before entering. Your mother knows I gave you those documents, he said without preamble. She's threatening to sue me for breach of confidentiality. Can she do that? She can try, but confidentiality doesn't cover criminal activity. Still, she's making my life difficult, calling my other clients, spreading rumors. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. But thank you for doing the right thing. He nodded. There's more you should know. Your grandfather suspected something might happen. That's why he left that letter in the safety deposit box. He told me about it, made me promise to look out for you if anything seemed wrong after his death. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Caldwell looked ashamed. I was a coward. Your mother is a powerful woman with powerful friends. I was afraid of what she might do. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small recording device. But I did make this, just in case. It's a conversation between your mother and Gerald Parker 3 weeks after your grandfather died. He pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room. The paperwork is perfect. No one will question it. You've covered everything? A male voice, presumably Parker, responded. Every base. The will looks authentic. Dates match up. As long as Bennett doesn't get involved, we're golden. And if he does? Deny everything. Say the old man changed his mind at the last minute. It's your word against a dead man's. Caldwell stopped the recording. There's more, but you get the idea. I'm giving you the original. Use it however you need to. I took the device, stunned by this additional evidence. Why are you doing this? Really? He looked away. Your grandfather gave me my start in this business when no one else would take a chance on me. I owe him. He headed for the door but paused. Be careful, Sophia. Your mother is desperate now. And desperate people do desperate things. After he left, I immediately called Bennett and told him about the recording. He sounded elated. This is the nail in the coffin. There's no way she can fight this now. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I just felt hollow. The mother I thought I knew, whatever her flaws, wouldn't have done something so calculated, so cruel. Who was this woman, really? That evening, as I was cooking dinner, there was a knock at my apartment door. I peered through the peephole, surprised to see my mother standing there alone. I hesitated, then opened the door, keeping the security chain engaged. What do you want? To talk, she said. Her usual perfect appearance was disheveled. Her hair was unstyled, her face free of makeup. She looked older, tired. Please, Sophia. 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I unlatched the chain and let her in. Say what you came to say. She stood awkwardly in my small living room, looking out of place in her expensive clothes. I've been served with papers. About the will. About fraud charges. Yes. You're really going through with this. It wasn't a question, but her voice held a note of disbelief, as if she still couldn't fathom that I would stand up to her. Did you think I wouldn't? That I'd just accept the $1,000 and walk away? That I'd let you erase Grandpa's wishes? She sank onto my couch, suddenly looking small. I never thought it would go this far. What did you think would happen when you forged his will? When you tried to steal my inheritance? I wasn't stealing, she said defensively. I was protecting you from yourself, from making the same mistakes your father made. Dad didn't make mistakes. He lived the life he wanted. And left us with nothing when he died, she snapped, her composure cracking. Do you have any idea what it was like? A widow at 45 with 2 children and barely enough insurance money to cover the funeral? I stared at her. We weren't poor, Mom. We were comfortable. Comfortable isn't secure. Comfortable isn't safe. She looked around my small apartment with disdain. Look at how you live. Paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment, working at a job with no future, no security. I'm happy, I said simply. Happiness doesn't last. Money does. She leaned forward. I was trying to protect you. Keep you from wasting your inheritance on art. She said the word like it was shameful. It wasn't your decision to make. It was Grandpa's money, and he wanted me to have it. He didn't understand how the real world works, she said dismissively. He indulged your impractical dreams just like your father did. I felt a surge of anger. Is that why you did this? Because you resented that Grandpa supported my choices? That Dad did? Something flickered in her eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. I wanted more for you than this. She gestured around my apartment again. More than struggling. More than worry. For a moment, I glimpsed the frightened woman beneath the controlling exterior, the widow who had been left to raise 2 children alone. The daughter of a Great Depression survivor who had grown up with stories of poverty and loss. But understanding didn't equal acceptance. "Mom," I said firmly, "whatever your reasons, what you did was wrong, illegal, and I can't just let it go. Even if it means sending your own mother to prison?" Her voice broke on the last word. "That's not what I want," I admitted. "But I won't be manipulated anymore. Not by guilt, not by threats, not by anything." She stood up abruptly. "So that's it? You've made your decision?" "You made the decision when you forged that will. I'm just dealing with the consequences." She walked to the door, then turned back, her face hardening again. "You'll regret this, Sophia. When you're alone, when you've torn this family apart, you'll regret choosing money over your own mother." "This isn't about money," I said wearily. "It never was. It's about truth. It's about respect. It's about letting me live my own life." But she was already gone, the door closing behind her with a final sounding click. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and granite, a temple to justice that made me feel small as I climbed the steps beside Lawrence Bennett. We were scheduled for a 10 a.m. hearing before Judge Eleanor Hayes, known for her no-nonsense approach to probate cases. "Remember," Bennett said quietly as we entered the building, "stick to the facts. Don't let emotion color your testimony. The evidence speaks for itself." I nodded, trying to calm my racing heart. I hadn't slept well the night before, torn between determination to see this through and lingering guilt about what might happen to my mother. The courtroom was already crowded when we entered. My mother sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, a sharp-featured man named Patrick Donovan known for his aggressive tactics. Jason sat directly behind them, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. I was surprised to see Margaret, Grandpa's secretary, sitting on our side of the courtroom. She gave me an encouraging smile. Robert Caldwell was there too, as was the forensic document expert Bennett had hired to testify about the forged will. Judge Hayes entered, and the bailiff called the court to order. The proceedings began with opening statements. Bennett laid out our case clearly. Richard Wright had created a valid will leaving specific bequests to multiple beneficiaries, including $2 million and property to me. My mother had forged a fraudulent will after his death that left everything to her, then offered me a mere fraction of my rightful inheritance to keep me quiet. Donovan countered that my grandfather had indeed changed his mind shortly before his death, concerned about my financial irresponsibility and unstable lifestyle choices. He painted me as a jealous, entitled granddaughter trying to override my grandfather's final wishes out of greed. I bit my tongue, reminding myself not to react visibly to the lies. The first witness was Lawrence Bennett himself, who testified about drawing up my grandfather's legitimate will and his certainty that the document presented by my mother was fraudulent. Mr. Wright was very specific about his wishes, Bennett told the court. He wanted his granddaughter to have financial independence. He said, and I quote, "Sophia has her father's integrity and her own vision. I want to make sure she has the resources to follow that vision without interference." My eyes stung at these words, so clearly reflecting Grandpa's voice and values. Next came the forensic document expert, who methodically dismantled the fraudulent will, pointing out inconsistencies in signature pressure, ink composition, and paper aging that indicated recent creation despite the earlier date. Then Robert Caldwell took the stand. He looked nervous but determined as he recounted providing financial services to my grandfather for over a decade. He testified about my mother's behavior after Grandpa's death, her insistence on controlling all aspects of the estate, and the conversations he had overheard between her and Gerald Parker. The recording he had given me was entered into evidence, and the courtroom fell silent as my mother's voice filled the space, discussing the forgery in explicit detail. I stole a glance at her. She sat rigidly, her face a mask of controlled fury. Jason looked physically ill. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I took the oath and sat in the witness chair, trying to appear calmer than I felt. Bennett led me through my testimony gently, having me explain my relationship with my grandfather, our regular visits, the discussions we'd had about his will and his wishes for my future. I described finding the letter in the safety deposit box, my mother's offer of $1,000 and later $50,000 to sign away my rights, and the threatening text I had received. Donovan's cross-examination was brutal. He tried to paint me as a spoiled, entitled woman with no real career, no achievements, no responsibility. Isn't it true, Ms. Wright, that you've never held a job paying more than $40,000 a year? That you live in a rented apartment? That you have no investments, no savings account worth mentioning? I've chosen a career I'm passionate about, I responded evenly. My grandfather understood and respected that choice. Isn't it possible that in his final days, seeing your continued, modest lifestyle choices, he reconsidered whether you were ready for such a substantial inheritance? No, it's not possible, I said firmly. We spoke about his will just 2 weeks before he died. He was clear about his intentions. So you claim, but we only have your word for that, don't we? And his letter, and Mr. Bennett's testimony, and the evidence of forgery, and the recording of my mother discussing that forgery. I looked directly at the judge. The truth isn't just my word, it's supported by evidence. Donovan switched tactics. Your mother offered you $50,000 as a settlement. Why wasn't that enough? Most people would consider that quite generous. It wasn't about the amount, I explained. It was about honoring my grandfather's wishes, and about not letting someone use money to control my life. Control your life? Donovan repeated skeptically. Isn't that a bit dramatic? How exactly was your mother trying to control you? I took a deep breath. My mother has always disapproved of my career choice, my lifestyle, my independence. By withholding the inheritance my grandfather intended for me, she was ensuring I would remain financially dependent, that I would eventually have to turn to her for help, on her terms. So this is about rebellion then? Asserting your independence against your mother's wisdom and experience? No, sir. This is about truth and justice. My grandfather wanted me to have financial security while pursuing my passion. My mother tried to take that away because it didn't align with her values. After I stepped down, my mother took the stand. She was the picture of dignified grief, dabbing at her eyes as she spoke about her father's final days, his supposed concerns about my irresponsible nature, his last-minute decision to change his will. My father and I were very close, she said, her voice catching artfully. He trusted my judgment about the family's financial matters. He knew I would take care of everyone appropriately. And the recording we heard earlier? The judge asked directly. How do you explain that? For the first time, my mother faltered. That was taken out of context. Mr. Parker was helping me organize legitimate paperwork. Sophia has twisted this situation out of spite. Judge Hayes looked unimpressed. And the metadata showing the will was created on your computer days before your father's death? The expert testimony about the forged signature? The bank transfer to Mr. Parker? Are those all being twisted too? My mother had no good answer. As she stepped down, our eyes met briefly. The look she gave me was pure venom. After a short recess, Judge Hayes delivered her ruling. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented today, I find that the will submitted by Diane Wright is fraudulent and therefore invalid. The legitimate will, dated August 15th of last year and witnessed by Lawrence Bennett and Margaret Thompson, is hereby recognized as the true last will and testament of Richard Wright. I closed my eyes in relief as she continued. All distributions made under the fraudulent will are hereby nullified and must be returned to the estate for proper distribution according to the legitimate will. Furthermore, given the serious nature of the fraud evidenced in this case, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. My mother sat completely still, her face drained of color. Jason had his head in his hands. As we left the courtroom, Bennett squeezed my shoulder. You did it, Sophia. Your grandfather would be proud. But victory felt hollow as I watched my mother being consoled by her lawyer, looking suddenly old and defeated. I had won, but at what cost? Our family was irrevocably shattered. Margaret approached me, pulling me into a warm hug. Richard always said you had more courage than the rest of the family combined. He was right. Thank you for being here, I said, genuinely touched. Wild horses couldn't have kept me away. That woman tried to erase his legacy, his final wishes. Someone had to stand up for him. She patted my cheek affectionately. He wanted you to have the freedom to pursue your dreams, Sophia. Don't forget that. As I walked down the courthouse steps into the bright sunshine, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. The truth had prevailed, but the price had been steep. I wondered if there would ever be a way to rebuild what had been broken, or if some fractures were simply too deep to heal. 2 weeks after the hearing, I stood in the driveway of Grandpa's lake house in New Hampshire, key in hand. According to the legitimate will, the property now belonged to me, along with the $2 million that had been transferred to my account, and the art collection that had meant so much to both of us. The house was exactly as I remembered it, a beautiful cedar and stone structure overlooking Lake Winnipesaukee, with a wraparound porch and dock stretching into the clear water. Grandpa and I had spent countless summer weekends here, fishing, reading, talking about life. It was here, on this porch, that he had encouraged me to pursue art history despite my mother's opposition. "Follow what lights you up, Sophia," he had said, his eyes crinkling with wisdom. "Money comes and goes, but regret stays forever." I unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scent of pine and old books. Everything was just as he had left it. His fishing gear by the door, his favorite chair angled toward the view, his books lining the shelves. I ran my fingers along the spines, remembering how he would quote passages to me, building my love of literature alongside my passion for art. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Bennett. "Criminal charges filed against your mother today. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy. Thought you should know." I sank into Grandpa's chair, staring out at the peaceful lake. Despite everything, the news hit me hard. My mother might go to prison. Because of me. Because I had refused to let her manipulation stand. Part of me wondered if I should have accepted the $50,000, let the whole thing go. But then I looked around at this place that had meant so much to Grandpa, that now meant so much to me. This wasn't just about money. It was about honoring his memory, his wishes, about standing up for myself in a way I never had before. My phone rang. Jason's number. I hesitated before answering. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Have you heard?" His voice sounded strained. "About the criminal charges?" "Yes, just now." "She could go to prison, Sophia. Actual prison." There was anger in his voice, but underneath it, fear. "I know." I sighed. "That's not what I wanted." "Then do something about it. Talk to the DA. Tell them you don't want to press charges." "It doesn't work that way, Jason. This is the state prosecuting her now, not me." "But they'd listen to you. You're the victim." The word struck me oddly. Victim. Was that how I saw myself? Is that how Grandpa would have wanted me to see myself? "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But Jason, what she did was wrong. Really wrong." "She's our mother," he said, as if that explained and excused everything. After we hung up, I wandered through the house, lost in thought. In Grandpa's study, I found a photo of the four of us, Mom, Dad, Jason, and me, taken when I was about 10. We were on this very lake, all smiles in the summer sun. My mother looked happy, relaxed, her arm around my shoulders. What had happened to that woman? I spent the night at the lake house, sleeping in the room that had always been mine during our visits. In the morning, I made a decision. I drove back to Boston and went directly to the district attorney's office. Elaine Cortez looked surprised to see me without an appointment. "Ms. Wright, what can I do for you?" "I want to talk about my mother's case," I said, sitting across from her desk. "The evidence is quite strong," she said cautiously. "We're moving forward with prosecution. I understand that, and I'm not asking you to drop the charges. What she did was wrong, and there should be consequences." I took a deep breath. But I'd like to request leniency in sentencing, if possible. Cortez studied me. May I ask why? After what she did to you? She's still my mother, I said simply. And I think she's driven by fear more than malice. Fear of insecurity, of losing control. That doesn't excuse fraud. No, it doesn't. But maybe it explains it. I met her gaze steadily. I got what I wanted, my inheritance as Grandpa intended. Justice has been served in that sense. I don't need further punishment for her to feel vindicated. Cortez nodded slowly. I can't make any promises, but I'll take your statement into consideration. There might be options. A plea deal with reduced jail time, maybe substantial probation and community service instead. Thank you, I said, feeling a weight lift slightly from my shoulders. As I left her office, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from an unknown number. A voicemail notification blinked on my screen. I played it as I walked to my car. Sophia, it's Robert Caldwell. Call me back as soon as you can. It's about your mother. It's not good. A knot of dread formed in my stomach as I called him back. What's happened? I asked when he answered. Your mother tried to take her own life last night, he said quietly. Jason found her. She's at Boston General. The world seemed to tilt sideways. She's stable. They pumped her stomach in time, but Jason said she left a note, blaming you. My hand shook as I ended the call. I drove to the hospital in a daze, not sure what I would say or do when I got there, only knowing that I had to go. The ICU waiting room was sterile and cold. Jason sat alone, his head in his hands. He looked up as I approached, his expression hardening. What are you doing here? I heard what happened. How is she? Like you care, he spat. This is what you wanted, isn't it? To destroy her? Of course not, I said, shocked. Jason, I never wanted this. She lost everything because of you. Her reputation, her freedom, her dignity. What did you expect would happen? I expected her to take responsibility for what she did, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Not this. Never this. A doctor approached before Jason could respond. Mr. Wright, your mother is awake. You can see her now. Jason stood. I'm going in alone. She doesn't want to see you. I nodded, understanding but still hurt. Just tell her I'm here, okay? If she changes her mind. He walked away without answering. I sank into an uncomfortable chair, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Guilt, anger, sadness, compassion, all swirled together into a confusing mess. An hour passed. Then another. I got coffee from a vending machine, paced the waiting room, stared blankly at muted CNN on the TV in the corner. Finally, Jason emerged. She'll see you, he said curtly. Room 412. 5 minutes. My mother looked small in the hospital bed, tubes running from her arms, the steady beep of monitors the only sound in the room. Her face was pale, her hair limp against the pillow. Without her usual perfect makeup and styled hair, she looked older, vulnerable. Mom, I said softly, approaching the bed. Her eyes opened, fixing on me with a gaze that still held some of her old intensity. Come to see your handiwork? Her voice was raspy, weak. I came because you're my mother, I said simply. And I was worried. Worried, she repeated. After you destroyed me. I pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down. I didn't destroy you, Mom. You made choices. Illegal choices. There are consequences for that. I was protecting you, she whispered. From yourself. From ending up like your father. Dad was happy, I said gently. Maybe not rich, but happy. There are worse things. Like what? Prison? A tear slipped down her cheek. I can't go to prison, Sophia. I can't. I reached for her hand, surprised when she didn't pull away. I talked to the DA today, asked for leniency. There might be a way to avoid prison time. She looked at me in surprise. Why would you do that? After everything, because despite it all, you're still my mother. And I think, maybe Maybe we both need to try to understand each other better. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared at our joined hands. Then, almost inaudibly, "I was so afraid." "Of what?" "Of you ending up struggling. Of watching you suffer like I did after your father died. Of losing control." Another tear fell. "I thought I was protecting you." "By controlling me," I said, not accusingly but matter-of-factly. "Yes," she admitted. "I've always needed to control things. People. Outcomes. It's the only way I know to feel safe." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. In this sterile hospital room, stripped of pretenses and power plays, we were just two flawed women trying to find our way through a damaged relationship. "I can't promise what will happen with the legal case," I told her, "but I can promise I'll be there through it. That we'll figure it out somehow." She nodded slightly, her eyes drifting closed with exhaustion. I stood to leave, but her fingers tightened around mine. "The lake house," she murmured. "He always wanted you to have it." It was as close to an admission, to an apology, as I was likely to get. For now, it was enough. "I know, Mom," I said softly. "I know." 6 months later, I sat on the dock at the lake house, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. The air was growing cooler as summer transitioned to fall, but I wasn't ready to go inside yet. These quiet moments by the water had become a form of therapy for me, a way to process everything that had happened. My mother had accepted a plea deal: 2 years of house arrest, 5 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory therapy. She had sold her Boston house to pay restitution and legal fees and now lived in a modest condo in Cambridge. The criminal record would follow her for life, but she had avoided prison. Our relationship remained complicated. We spoke weekly, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes with surprising openness. The therapy seemed to be helping her recognize her controlling tendencies, though change at 63 didn't come easily. "Your grandfather enabled me," she had admitted during one of our more honest conversations. "He cleaned up my messes, made excuses for my behavior. No one ever really held me accountable before." "That must make me your worst nightmare," I had joked. And surprisingly, she had laughed. "Maybe what I needed all along," she had replied thoughtfully. Jason and I were slowly rebuilding our relationship too. He had been forced to return the $1 million to the estate, which had been a bitter pill for him to swallow. But the experience had opened his eyes to our mother's manipulation and his own complicity in it. "I always knew she favored me," he confessed during a visit to the lake house. "And I used it to my advantage. I'm not proud of that." As for me, I was finding my way in this new reality. The $2 million sat mostly untouched in carefully managed investments. I had used some to pay off my student loans and to buy a small but lovely apartment in Boston, close to the gallery. I had also donated to several arts education programs in underserved communities, something Grandpa would have approved of. The lake house remained unchanged. I couldn't bring myself to alter what Grandpa had created here. It had become my weekend retreat, a place to paint, read, and reflect. I had started painting again, something I hadn't done seriously since college. My first completed work in years hung in my apartment, a sunset over this very lake, with Grandpa's silhouette on the dock. The act of creating it had been healing, a way to honor him beyond just preserving his possessions. The gallery owner had been impressed enough with my work to offer me a chance to curate a small exhibition of emerging artists. It was a step up in my career, one that would never have been possible if I were still living paycheck to paycheck. That was the thing about financial security. It didn't bring happiness on its own, but it created space for happiness to grow. Space to pursue passions, take risks, build something meaningful. That had been Grandpa's gift to me, one my mother had nearly taken away. I heard footsteps on the dock behind me and turned to see Margaret approaching with 2 mugs of steaming tea. "Thought you might be getting cold out here," she said, handing me one. Margaret had become a regular visitor to the lake house. At 72, she had retired after Grandpa's death, but remained a connection to him, full of stories I had never heard and insights into who he had been beyond our relationship. "Thanks," I said. wrapping my hands around the warm mug, just watching the sunset. Never gets old. She settled beside me on the bench. Richard used to say that too. Nature's best art show, every single day. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping tea and watching the light change. Your mother called me yesterday, Margaret said eventually. I turned to her in surprise. She did? Why? Wanted to apologize for how she treated me after Richard died, for trying to erase what he wanted. Margaret shook her head. Never thought I'd see the day Diane Wright would apologize to anyone, least of all me. She's changing, I said. Slowly, but still. Because of you, Margaret pointed out. Because you stood up to her. No one ever really did before, except maybe your father, and she found ways to work around him. I considered this. I didn't set out to change her. I just couldn't let her get away with it. For Grandpa's sake. And for mine. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply stand our ground, Margaret said. Richard knew you had that in you. That's why he left you the means to be truly independent. The sun dipped below the tree line, leaving the sky a deepening purple. In the distance, a loon called out across the water, hauntingly beautiful. I still miss him, I said quietly. Every day. So do I, Margaret agreed. But he's here in so many ways. In this place. In the lessons he taught you. In the strength you found when you needed it most. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Grandpa had given me more than money or property. He had given me the confidence to stand up for myself, to fight for what was right, to create a life on my own terms. The inheritance had been his final gift, but the real legacy was what he had built in me over a lifetime of love and understanding. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from my mother. Therapist suggested family dinner next week. Neutral location. You, me, Jason. Willing to try if you are. I smiled slightly as I typed my response. Name the place. I'll be there. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. But as I sat on the dock my grandfather had built, looking out at the lake he had loved, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was where I belonged. This was what I had fought for. Not just the money or the property, but the right to be myself, to honor his memory, to live with integrity. My mother had inherited $10 million from my grandfather and then given me just $1,000, saying I didn't need more. She had been wrong about so many things, but perhaps most of all about this. What I needed wasn't money, but respect. The courage to stand up for myself. The wisdom to know when to fight and when to forgive. In the end, I had gained something far more valuable than any inheritance. I had found my voice, my strength, my worth, and that was something no one could ever take away from me again.